morning, good afternoon, good whenever you are listening. Welcome back to the 7th installment of our 8-part saga of divisional previews. You are listening to the Pylon Fantasy Football Podcast. If you don't know by my voice, you probably don't, because, maybe it's your first time here, maybe you're prepping for the season. My name is Benjamin Nathan Weiner. It's a pleasure to meet you. I am joined, as always, by the eccentric, the well-researched, the never well-rested, but always brings his A game, AJ Carrion. AJ, how you doing this morning?
I'm doing good. I'm super excited to get into the AFC West today, which is going to be the division we're talking about. Yeah, Ben, how are you?
Dude, I am, between you and me and all of our listeners, I'm actually kind of in shambles. Moving apartments is an absolute nightmare. For those of you who are on YouTube, usually when I'm in my apartment, I have my whole mic set up, but I had to pack that up, which is pretty, crazy. My room is, barren. It's a little bit, sad, but at the same time, my apartment stinks. So I'm really, really excited to be moving. And then tomorrow I'm back to Virginia, but I got a nice dinner lined up with Mom and Pops tonight, which should be good. Gonna get a little steak. And the really exciting thing, though, is the fact that we're recording on a Sunday morning. And what's beautiful about this is that in about a month from right now, I'm about to be texting you DFS lineups and being like, see you at the crib in 15, right? Which is just so exciting. The energy. Football is coming, people. Football is coming. We're going to see grown men try and catch a leather ball and beat the living crap out of each other for 7 hours, commercial-free, every single Sunday. And I couldn't be more excited.
I couldn't have said that better myself, honestly. Your excitement for the NFL season is definitely replicated. I'm super pumped just to be getting ready for the fantasy football season. And now that we are reaching the penultimate division preview, I just want to remind you guys to make sure you go check us out on our socials at AJ the Pylon Don, at Ben the Pylon Don on Twitter, as well as Pylon Dons on Twitter and the Pylon Dons on Instagram. And of course, if you want to help us hit that 50 subscriber mark on YouTube, make sure you go check out Pylon Dons Fantasy Football over there as well. Ben, anything else you want to cover for the listeners before we get right into it?
I'm just so gosh darn excited for football. AJ, you don't understand how excited I am to sit down in a comfy chair with an iced coffee from Dunkin'. Maybe I made myself some low-calorie French toast or a big leg and cheese. I'm a little hungover, but not so hungover I'm upset by it. And I'm just sitting next to you, just be like, holy crap, did you set your lineup? And you'll be like, of course I did. I set it on Wednesday. Like anyone who knows what's going on. But no, that's all I got except for the rest of the show where I have tons of takes and opinions. So let's get into it, I guess, right?
Yeah, let's get into it. The first thing we do, for those who are familiar with our divisional previews, we discuss whether or not we're targeting teams within the division as a whole. Then we'll go into the team-by-team breakdown where Ben and I will speak our piece on 2 teams each in the division, and then we'll go into those superlatives such as must-have and can't-have player in the division. So first things first, Ben, are you targeting AFC West teams?
Well, yes.
I don't think this needs a terrible amount of explanation.
How could you avoid them? These are all the premier offensive players in the NFL. Imagine not having Devontae Adams, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Darren Waller, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Russell Wilson, Jerry Judy, just off your board. It was funny last week when you said, well, I'm not targeting this division, but I'm not going to wipe 4 NFL teams off my board. There isn't a team in this division you could wipe off your board. There's just teams you're drafting more of and teams that maybe you get sniped on.
Yeah, that's really the truth of the matter, because the offensive firepower in this division is arguably second to none. Just top to bottom, the big thing about this division is 4 high-end starting quarterbacks are in this division, and that is why you have so many players in this division with such high average draft positions like you so eloquently brought up, because when you have pass catching options and even running backs playing alongside elite quarterbacks, their floors just get that much higher. And that's why some of these guys are expensive, but a lot of them are really worth every penny, even if you do have to draft them a little bit earlier than you might think. So, yeah, I'm obviously going to be targeting teams in this division. Anybody catching balls from Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, Russell Wilson has to be given their due diligence, even if they do have their holes in their game. And that's kind of what makes this division so enticing. So I think that's going to lead us right into the team by team breakdown. Pretty straightforward. We're both definitely targeting teams in this division. But Ben, a team that has really been a hot button topic for the both of us for the entirety of the offseason. And the first team I'm going to let you talk about is the Denver Broncos. So if you would like to take that away, go right ahead.
Thank you, because I've been foaming at the mouth for this. I got to be honest. Outside of my New England Patriots, I think the Denver Broncos are the bee's knees. They're my non-Patriots Super Bowl pick, which in your mind should just register as, oh, that's a Super Bowl pick. I think this team is going to be ridiculous. That's my opinion. Here's why. Well, actually, no, not here's why, because this is a fantasy podcast. Here is what I like about them from a fantasy football perspective. First off, I am over the moon about Russell Wilson in Denver. I'm over the moon about it for Russell Wilson. I'm over the moon about it for his weapons. I'm over the moon that he gets a new coach in Nathaniel Hackett who is going to let Russ cook. Pull out the rosemary, pull out the adobo, pull out the Italian mix. It doesn't matter. He's chefing it all up. What I really like about Russell Wilson in this offense specifically is, yes, he's had DK Metcalf, who's unbelievable, and he's had Tyler Lockett, but I feel like for years, Russell Wilson has been making something of his weapons. He'll make a guy like Will Dissly work. He'll be a huge part of getting Chris Carson, who's a great player, recently retired in his own right, involved. He will make guys like even Freddie Swaim work now and again. I feel like this offense, when they traded for Russell Wilson, they rolled out the red carpet. Okay, here's Cortland Sutton, here's Jerry Giuди, here's Tim Patrick, here's our two elite running backs in Javonte Williams and Melvin Gordon, here's our league average above O-line, but the real cherry on top is here's a defense to support you. I feel like every aspect of this team is something that Russell Wilson at one point had in Seattle. He's had a great receivers in DK and Lockett. He's had great running backs in Carson and Marshawn Lynch. He's had a great defense, but it feels like it's been a long time since he's had all of these things fall into place at the same time. So I'm really expecting a big season from Russell Wilson. I think he is going to be a great value as a back-end quarterback one who's going to have weekly quarterback one upside overall any given week. AJ, you're going to like what I'm about to say. This is good news to you because this Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon thing. I have been relatively outspoken about Javonte Williams. I have had him lower in my rankings than most. I wasn't fully convinced he's even a high-end RB2. Because I think Melvin Gordon's great. Melvin Gordon, Russell Wilson's college teammate. Melvin Gordon continually getting paid, continually being a part of this offense. The word on the street is, and I know it's that time of year where beat reporters mess with our heads a little bit, that Javonte may be winning this role outright. My only argument ever against Javonte Williams was I wasn't sure he'd have the job. I've never had any issue with the player talent. So Javonte gets the job. I think he could be a league winner in that second, third round area. I guess with Javonte, I'm just waiting until I really feel like I think he has the job.
Yeah, since it's speculation. Yeah, since it's speculation now, that risk is baked into his current cost. But even earlier this offseason, his ADP was even higher inside the top 10. And some people will still take him as an RB1, as if him being the outright bell cow is a foregone conclusion. Listen, Melvin Gordon is 29 years old. This guy's also a touchdown machine. He has basically never scored less than 8 touchdowns as a full season starter or as a full season back that receives significant percentages of the backfield snap share. So it's not like Javonte Williams, if he wins the job, is going to have the longest leash in the NFL, you're not going to be able to just rely on him to get 20 plus touches a game for 17 games, because if the Broncos are a fantastic football team like you're projecting, they may not want him to get hurt. He may get you 12 fantasy points in the first half, and they're up 21-0 on a cellar dweller, and then we get the Melvin Gordon show. So definitely baked into his cost, that sort of risk. But I mean, I'll expand on it a little bit later. I'm fully in the same train of thought with you that he could be a league winner.
Yeah. So my thoughts for Javonte Williams, and this could cause me individually, Ben Weiner, to miss the boat. The beauty of this, though, is, and we tell you guys all the time, you don't need to take our words as gospel. We're trying to provide our opinions, and we're trying to flesh them out so you can pick and choose through it and be like, I agree with this, I don't agree with this. I think with Javonte, I'm going to be drafting Javonte in redraft leagues in round 1 if it comes out that he is the real starter. I think I'm a little too chicken to be taking him at his current ADP where I'm not guaranteed. I would rather wait and pay more and feel more secure in my investment than risk it in that second, third round. That's me personally. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. That's how I'm going to be going about it. Because, like, at the same time, if you buy him down in the third round and you're right, thanks for playing. Game over. So it's certainly a little bit of a tricky one there. Now, taking over to the receiver position, I am opinionated on these receivers. And a lot of people are. They're all hot-button topics. Everyone wants Russell Wilson's top weapons. Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler. All very talented. I just told you the order that I have them. I'm going to touch upon Jerry Jeudy later. I'm going to talk about Courtland Sutton now. The thing that's nice with Courtland Sutton is that Russell Wilson loves his big body receivers, and that Courtland Sutton has produced before. He was the 2019 wide receiver 19 off the top of my head. He was very much in that high wide receiver 2 range, maybe even higher. And he's an elite talent, and now it's his second year off the injury. So the fact that he fits a profile that Russ likes and he really should be good to go is very, very enticing from a fantasy perspective. Tim Patrick's just a baller. He's just behind players who are better. He's like the Lou Williams six man of this wide receiver core. Like, Tim Patrick is nasty. Don't get it twisted. He just won't. He's going to see 4 or 5 targets a game, and in weeks he scores touchdowns, he'll be a starter. KJ Hamler, really just a best ball play, but talk about a guy who can take any single play to the house. AJ, even though I'm tabling Jeudy for later, any thoughts on the 3 receivers, Sutton, Patrick, and Hamler?
Yeah, you're drafting Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton right now to somewhat replicate that sort of double high-end wide receiver 2 with weekly top 8 upside that we saw out of both DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett for the last 2 years in tandem in Seattle with Russell Wilson. However, and more so alluding to last year, Russ got a lot more opportunity to throw, and that worked for them in the first half of the season, but it didn't necessarily lead to wins. I think that's more of a result of the Seattle Seahawks being poorly coached by Pete Carroll than anything else. And I think the Broncos are going to be in a much better position to let him throw. But I do think there is a chance that he spreads the ball quite a bit. So in best ball, I actually really do like stacking Russell Wilson and multiple Denver options, just because I do think that on a week-to-week basis, this is going to be a top 6, top 7 offense in the NFL. I'm pretty darn confident in that. For season-long redraft, I'm a little bit more shy when it comes to taking these receivers at ADP, just because there's guys with a clearer path to better weekly volume. And for me, that's just something I prefer, especially if they're going to be my wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2.
Yeah, and that's totally fair, because that's the thing is when there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, there's only so many pass attempts that this Denver offense is going to have in a game, even though they are going to be a pass-heavy team. They've came out and said, we're building this offense around Russell Wilson, which is great news for the receivers. But at the same time, there's going to be weeks where, like, Tim Patrick is just going to see, like, 8 targets because they really like his matchup. And, like, that's going to just hurt one of Jeudy or Sutton. It just is what it is. Taking it over to tight end now. Thank God that we're all past this Albert O nonsense. You remember back in like March, Albert O's the top 8 dynasty tight end. Now that he has Russell Wilson and they traded Noah Fant, boom, smackdown. Takes Greg Dulcich in the draft. Greg Dulcich is an animal of a prospect. That dude has like quads the size of like ginormous genetically modified watermelons. He's a friggin' beast. And like, I like Albert O's profile. He's a talented guy for sure. But it's just evidence that, like, for me, Albert O is the odd man out in this offense. Like, I'm into Giudy. I'm into Sutton at cost behind Giudy. I'm into Patrick at ADP. I'm into Melvin Gordon. I'm into Javonte. Like, not everyone can hit. And the tight end position for me is what's not going to be hitting here. Not to say, like, of course, Albert O is going to have spike weeks. He is a behemoth in the red zone. I'm willing to bet he even has a multi-touchdown game this year, but it's going to be inconsistent and the volume's not going to be there. And that's my take on Albert O.
Albert O is a tight end I'm totally fine drafting and pairing with other late-round tight ends, but I think that's where people get a little bit confused. These late-round tight ends are not meant to be your set-it-and-forget-it guys.
Definitely.
There's nobody you should be taking in the double-digit rounds that you're setting and forgetting, and that's currently where Albert O is going. So do I like Albert O? Absolutely. Do I like him a lot more when I also have Hunter Henry or Gerald Everett or Cole Kmet? Absolutely, 100%. So it's definitely baked into that. If you're not grabbing an early round tight end, Albert O is an interesting matchup because there have been some health concerns with a lot of this team. I mean, Melvin Gordon has missed time. Both top receivers have missed time. And while Greg Dulcich is a great prospect, he's also a rookie, and Albert O was wildly efficient last year. And Russell Wilson actually helped Gerald Everett reach all of his career highs last year in Seattle on relatively solid target share. I believe it was just over 65 targets for Gerald Everett. So Russ isn't necessarily a stranger to targeting the tight end at all. But like you said, it definitely won't be weekly top 12 performances out of Albert O every single time, and that's definitely baked into his cost. But I do think at his current cost of the 15th tight end off the board, I'm pretty comfortable taking him at ADP over guys like Pat Freiermuth and Irv Smith.
Over Irv Smith, a million times yes. A million times yes. Over Pat Fry, yeah, I'd probably. That's a tricky one. Can I actually? I don't know if I want to like make a take on that just yet. Can we put a pin in that Albert O. Pat Freiermuth thing?
Yeah.
Because here's my thing. Don't get me wrong. Like Pat Freiermuth should be the better talent, but do I really want Mitch Trubisky's like fifth option over Russell Wilson's fourth? Which isn't always the best way to think about things. But sometimes when you're deciding between two players, you need to make a simple decision. Like, just look at what's in front of you. Where does the talent and opportunity intersect? I'm sure we could go deep into the A dots and the 40 times and the analytics and get a more concise answer. But when we're on air, we got to think like, I don't know what that sound was. I'm not going to make that again on air. No promises. So we're going to put a pin in that. But my main point was that I don't want Albert O as my starting tight end in a redraft league. That was probably how I should have tied that all together. Anyhow, that was the scenic route in the Rocky Mountains. AJ, you want to take us over to you've been wanting to talk about this Raiders team all offseason. You're loving this Raiders team.
Yeah, I am really in on this Raiders team. People tend to forget that this was a playoff team last year. Derek Carr, despite only throwing 24 regular season touchdowns, was able to finish as a top 12 quarterback last year with virtually no rushing chops in his repertoire. So pretty much gets all of it done through the air. Was able to remain top 12 with tons of targets going to guys like Zay Jones, Brian Edwards. I mean, he was working with a lot of guys who pale in comparison to his new wide receiver one and former college teammate Devontae Adams. So I think the wide receiver upgrade is not only going to help Adams, but I think it's also going to be pretty good for Hunter Renfrow. A lot of people are projecting Renfrow to take a major step back, and I don't think he'll finish necessarily anywhere close to that top 12 finish that he had in full point PPR last year. But I think a lot of people are sleeping on the fact that Davante Adams, throughout his entire tenure in Green Bay, has drawn some of the most double coverage of any receiver in NFL history. And you've got 30-year-old Darren Waller, who was dealing with an injury last year, and in the return from his injury, was not nearly as efficient with his targets and struggled to get open compared to what we saw in 2020 out of Darren Waller. So with Hunter Renfrow pretty much reaching that 26-year-old, 27-year-old prime that a lot of receivers hit, especially as a guy in the slot with no injury history, I'm definitely above consensus on Hunter Renfrow, who's currently going at the wide receiver 39. And a lot of that ends up being tied into the way I have Derek Carr ranked, who is currently my QB 11 on my board. And the thing about Derek Carr that a lot of people don't tend to realize, he doesn't throw a ton of touchdowns. I mean, in 2015, he threw 32 touchdowns. He hasn't broken 27 touchdowns since then. I think this is the year with Josh McDaniels where he returns to that 30 touchdown club, especially with Davante Adams in the fold. So I'm definitely above consensus on Derek Carr. If I'm going to be passing on quarterback this year, Derek Carr is going to be the guy I'm going to be looking at as soon as those double-digit rounds hit to shore up that position, potentially pairing him with somebody like a Tua Tagovailoa, whose floor is a lot lower, but with this new offense could potentially have a much higher ceiling. So for Davante Adams, let's not get ahead of ourselves. He's not playing with Aaron Rodgers. I get it. This guy just finished as the wide receiver 1 and then finished as the wide receiver 2. And with Cooper Kupp's obviously historic season, the gap between him and Kupp was pretty wide. But the gap between him and everybody else not named Kupp was also kind of wide last year. I don't think people are fully wrapping their heads around the type of consistent dominance that Davante Adams has provided over these last 3 years. And I don't think a quarterback change is going to necessarily hurt him because I trust the talent of Derek Carr's arm to provide Davante Adams the opportunity to succeed. Plus, Adams hasn't played alongside guys that demand defensive attention to the extent that Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow will. So I'm above consensus on Adams. I'm above consensus on Renfrow. This is where my opinions on the Raiders get a little less bullish. I'm definitely below consensus on Darren Waller this year. I've actually got him as my tight end 5 right now, behind George Kittle, which is definitely not reflected in current average draft position, with Darren Waller currently going about 7-8 picks before George Kittle right now. I think Darren Waller is a phenomenal talent. I just don't see a world where if Josh McDaniels is going to try and establish the run game, which he has throughout his entire career, and let Davante Adams be the feature guy, that Darren Waller can get some of that elite volume that he was receiving in the past that let him be a top 2, top 3 tight end off boards without question. That volume is gone. And when tight ends take a hit to their volume, it really puts into perspective just how efficient they have to be in that elite of elite tier. So if you're getting Darren Waller just one round after you're getting Kyle Pitts, go pay for Kyle Pitts. It's not worth the saving of just 12 picks to go get a guy that could theoretically get significantly less volume than a guy like Kyle Pitts. So right now, I'm not really targeting Waller as one of those early tight ends to go snag, just because I think his cost being inside the top 50 is a little bit rich for me. I do trust Derek Carr, and really, if you look at the rest of this receiver room, it's Mac Hollins, Demarcus Robinson, and Keenan Cole after Hunter Renfrow. So there is a world where all 3 of these guys can meet or exceed their current ADPs if Derek Carr does what I think he's capable of. I just more so foresee Hunter Renfrow being a little bit better than the wide receiver 39 he's being drafted as, and Davante Adams finishing inside the top 5 receivers.
So the way I hear this, and I'm just breaking down what I'm hearing from you, Derek Carr's a dog. Davante Adams is a generational talent who should not be slept on. You're more concerned about Waller because you're in on Renfrow. That's where the split is. You're like, Adams gets his, You think that Renfro cuts into Waller. Totally cool with that. I don't have any issue. For me, I think that's the right way to look at it. And I don't really, honestly, I haven't drafted a lot of Waller or Renfro. Waller's a guy I'm super familiar with. I think he had some bad luck last year. Admittedly, I'm not crazy about either guy, except I really just want Devontae Adams. And the reason for that is because I think it's a little bit confusing. I think your opinion and your research and your analytics there are totally spot on. And then I think someone else should come and make a really great devil's advocate argument for Waller. So for me, I've just been wiping my hands clean and just taking Devontae Adams. That's how I've
Yeah,
been operating.
there's definitely a lot of me projecting and trying to emphasize to the listeners that Hunter Renfro being the wide receiver 12, that doesn't just like happen by accident. A,
Definitely not. You're totally
a
correct.
receiver doesn't just magically become one of the best slot route running receivers in the NFL and then fade back into low end wide receiver 3 territory. That doesn't just occur. When you have a slot receiver that was able to do what Renfro did last year, they're going to go back in the slot. And Josh McDaniels likes to run 3 wide receiver sets, and he'll gladly throw Hunter Renfro in the slot there and put a Demarcus Robinson as a decoy on the outside. And that's not somebody we're going to have to worry about. But Hunter Renfro is going to get open over the middle of the field. And he was a huge part of this Raiders team making the playoffs. And I don't think that's going to be lost on Derek Carr or Josh McDaniels.
I fully agree with you. I think for me, I'm still pretty. I just have other guys in these ADPs that I like. But if you're
Totally,
right on this,
totally.
you're gonna. But I give you credit though because like we talk about all the time, like you need to pick and choose your spots. What problem do I really want to figure out? What do I feel good about? How am I going to win this league? And I feel like that you've identified a situation that you think you have a good read on, and if you execute on this, if you're correct, then you'll probably do very well in your leagues where you take Hunter Renfro. So I give you a lot of credit for finding a problem that you want to attack. It's almost like me with this Judy Sutton thing. You're looking at this Renfro Waller thing and being like, there's a clear answer. And I'm looking at Judy Sutton. I'm going, there's a clear answer. Hopefully, for both of our sakes, Cortland Sutton and Darren Waller don't just dominate because we will be out tons and tons of money, like upsetting amounts of money. But however, I'm really excited though for you to take it over to the running backs because I'm pretty excited about the running backs.
McDaniels has a history of running a committee. I don't really care. Zamir White's a 5th-round pick. I think they brought him in because they didn't want to extend Jacobs' option. I think if you saw, and you actually said this, and I couldn't find a way that this doesn't happen. If you saw what Damian Harris's volume and the types of snaps he took were last year, you could pretty much just peg that for Josh Jacobs this time around. He might not score 15 touchdowns just because Derek Carr really does like to throw in the red zone. But Josh Jacobs is going to get his. There's a lot of dead zone running backs around where Josh Jacobs is getting taken. And they're not as good at running the football as Josh Jacobs. And most of the time they are in more ambiguous situations than Josh Jacobs and likely playing in what I will project to be a worse offense. So Josh Jacobs being drafted right around 60 is a phenomenal value. And I think he's a really good RB2 to pair if you are going, maybe you try and go a hero RB strat. And instead of going on a nice little receiver run to start your draft, you end up taking one of those tight ends and you really want to just shore up another skill position. I think Josh Jacobs is going to be one of the safer RB2s. And it's very possible he just does Josh Jacobs things and you're like, oh, he got 10 touchdowns and 1,000 yards again. And he's RB9 through 15 weeks like he was last year and the year before that and the year before that. Like, it may not be pretty, but Josh Jacobs definitely gets it done on a season-long redraft scale, and he's not going to lose you weeks very often at all, which, while it's nice to just go after everybody with league-winning upside, you need those rocks that you can rely on, and Josh Jacobs, I think, is definitely one of them. So I'm not concerned about Zamir White or Kenyon Drake very much, and I think Josh Jacobs at his current low-end RB2 ADP is a really good candidate to potentially exceed that.
I couldn't have put it better myself. The only thing that you said that I would change is that you said we don't know if Josh Jacobs is going to score 15 touchdowns. And in my head, I kind of have him penciled in for like 15, 16. 17, maybe 18 touchdowns. Because AJ, think about how much you like this Raiders team. And now we're talking about the goal line back on this Raiders team. I think you're going to see a James Conner, Damian Harris type season out of Josh Jacobs. He may catch 15 balls all year. He may rush for like 950 yards, but I just feel like I'm going to be looking at my phone every single Sunday. 6 points. Josh Jacobs, 2-yard rushing touchdown. Josh Jacobs, 8-yard rushing touchdown, like over and over and over and over. Because being the feature back on an elite offense is the role you want. That's why we were so excited about Clyde Edwards-Helaire a couple years ago, and he just couldn't get it done. Well, newsflash, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is not as talented as Josh Jacobs. That's the end of the discussion. That's why Clyde didn't work out. But now that Josh Jacobs, for the first time ever in his career, is projected to be in an elite offense, I just think the touchdowns could rain down.
Yeah, I totally agree. And if this offense is as effective as I believe it can be, then it definitely will. We spent a lot of time talking about the Raiders. I had a lot of fun. You guys now know I will be rostering quite a bit of Derek Carr. So there's that. But Ben, let's take it over to a really, really interesting team with a lot of ADPs that can be discussed as being wildly over or under what they should be, in my opinion.
Okay, so this Kansas City team is going to be, we know they're going to be good. No one is saying that Kansas City will not be good. This offense, there's a lot of figuring out to do, but for the first time in a long time, Kansas City is a complicated fantasy football offense. It used to be very, very simple. You take Tyreek Hill, you take Travis Kelce, you take Patrick Mahomes, you take their running back in the mid rounds. Thank you. Now it's a little bit confusing. It's a little bit like a mirror maze. Patrick Mahomes coming into this season is not a consensus top 2 quarterback, which is certainly a change for us because people would take him over Josh Allen at times. Now Justin Herbert has certainly emerged from the fold. So it's pretty strange because Patrick Mahomes has that name brand value. You know he's going to get the weekly upside and the volume to be even the quarterback 1 overall. Who knows? Maybe these depreciated weapons will force Mahomes more than ever to just be an absolute animal, and he has to put the team on his back, and he has to throw for all these touchdowns. But we don't know that yet. So his ADP is like the quarterback 4 off the board. It's interesting. There's times when I take Mahomes, but he's admittedly not someone I really target. This running back room. I was really excited about Clyde Edwards-Helaire's first full off season because he's never had one before. And then he spends 2 days on the pup. I know it was just 2 days, but, full off season's a full off season. So at the same time, though, also, they brought in Rojo. They brought back Jerick McKinnon. And they drafted Isaiah Pacheco out of Rutgers. So this running back room, which once upon a time was supposed to be all Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is murky. Clyde is probably still the guy to own in this backfield. The question is, would you rather have Clyde than whoever else you could take? And my answer to that is probably not. Because Clyde should be the starter. He should be involved on third downs. But Jerick McKinnon's also going to be involved on third downs. And Ronald Jones is going to be getting that goal line work. And Isaiah Pacheco is the fastest and youngest running back on the roster. And I think it's going to be a little bit like, dare I say it, the Niners backfield situation. Whoever gets the hot hand that week could be a top 12 or a top 24 play. But I think all of these guys will find a way into someone's fantasy lineup over the course of this season. And I think it's going to be pretty ugly and frustrating. People have their hunches. I know, AJ, you've been liking Rojo a little bit lately. I had a hot flash where I really thought Clyde Edwards-Helaire could finally have his moment in the sun. Thank God that came in April before we got way too close to the season. I really didn't do too much damage. I like Jerick McKinnon considering he's free, but I think this is a little bit of a backfield to avoid, honestly, which is a strange take to say about Kansas City.
I don't think it's a strange take at all. You've got a lot of guys that don't really project to be top 32 running backs in a backfield that has a ton of opportunity in a pass-first offense. I do think Jerick McKinnon does have some standalone value, and it is a pretty good value currently being drafted outside the top 55 backs. You can get him free at the end of your drafts. as training progresses, monitoring all four members of this backfield is going to be really important because as much as I do like Ronald Jones, he might not be on the 53-man roster, and I'm totally comfortable with that. So I like Ronald Jones when he falls in my lap as the 45th running back off the board, just because he's part of this room. But I don't like him, and I definitely don't like CEH being drafted inside the top 40 because I just think there's too many opportunities for all of them to not succeed. And it's no part their fault. It's just how Andy Reid has structured this offense over the last 24 months. It's not indicative of going through a running back. Pretty much since Kareem Hunt has departed, it's involved a lot more of a committee approach. And also in the red zone, Andy Reid is just fine letting Patrick Mahomes throw because they don't need to have a bruiser on the goal line when they have one of the, if not the single best arm talent in the NFL.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also, if Rojo didn't burn me last year, I'd probably like him to an ADP. Like when I said that you like Rojo, I wasn't trying to speak for you. There was no shot. I've been down that hole before, and I'm just good. That's all. Taking over the receivers, the receiver picture is starting to clear up a little bit because, believe it or not, the Chiefs' wide receiver one is obviously frigging Travis Kelce. Like, that's just how it is. I think, and like this is not my bold take for each division. I think Travis Kelce may have a chance to lead the NFL in targets. It sounds crazy, but it's the best tight end in football, and all of his receivers have questions around him. I think Travis Kelce is the locked and loaded tight end one this year, in my opinion. However, as I was starting that sentence saying that the receiver room is gaining some clarity, I do think it is actually gaining a little bit of clarity as we progress through camp. There's two guys who I'm interested in owning, and I prefer one to the other with some of my own biases and opinions, but it doesn't change the fact that the clear top two guys are. It's Juju Smith-Schuster and it's Sky Moore. Those are going to be the fantasy-relevant Chiefs receivers. Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a best ball only play. Mecole Hardman is a I've never played fantasy football before play. So those are the plays there. Here's the deal. So Juju, they brought him in on a 1 year, $3 million deal. People were concerned because they paid MVS more. Pretty wild that they would pay Juju less. I don't care about the TikToking. I care a little bit about the low ADOT from yesteryear. I care about him not really beating out other very talented receivers in Pittsburgh. But this is a good opportunity for Juju. If Juju sees 100 targets from Patrick Mahomes, he should be fantasy viable. I have my own biases there. Juju's value is very, very fair. I'm just personally more excited by the shiny new toy that is Sky Moore. Sky Moore's been playing wide receiver for a year and a half, and he was good enough to be a second-round pick in the NFL. And every single report out of camp is that Sky Moore has been the goods. Like, that's what has been coming out of camp, is that Sky Moore is ready to contribute. They're going to use Sky Moore in a variety of creative ways that this Chiefs offense does. I could honestly see this being the sort of thing that Juju Smith-Schuster gets off to a really hot start as the year starts off. And then as Sky Moore breaks out later, they kind of come to an inner pass in terms of actual fantasy value. But those are the two receivers that I'm interested in.
Yeah, ditto the MVS best ball take. He's going to be a spike guy. He's going to basically do what he did in Green Bay, except in Kansas City. And I think they paid MVS more because they needed that deep threat really badly. And Juju was a guy that they were actually looking at getting in free agency in the 2021 offseason. So it's not like they just signed him on a whim. This is somebody that Andy Reid has had a vision for in his offense for now multiple off seasons, which for me is a really good sign. Plus, he is by far the biggest and most ready receiver to play a true X receiver alongside Travis Kelce, which I think has some merit to it. So for me, I'm really warming up to Juju Smith-Schuster in these last few weeks as my wide receiver 3 or my wide receiver 4 in fantasy for season-long redraft. Because like you said, that average depth of target has been really low for Juju these last 2 years, but I think that's more of a fault playing with Ben Roethlisberger as Roethlisberger has deteriorated. Patrick Mahomes is not deteriorating anytime soon, and Juju's best years and best games are when the offense is stretching the field and he's playing alongside an elite option that gets a good amount of targets and defensive attention. He was flourishing alongside Antonio Brown, and there's a real world where if he's the second option, he'll flourish alongside Travis Kelce. So I think the upside is something that not a lot of people are talking about enough, just because I think people are forgetting how often Andy Reid wants Patrick Mahomes throwing the rock. So I do think that Juju and Sky Moore are both values at their ADP. They're guys I'm taking before ADP, but I think Juju being drafted as wide receiver 32 is better than Sky Moore being drafted as wide receiver 40, especially because there is a much better chance that Sky Moore is going to take some time. And I think Juju Smith-Schuster right out of the gate is going to be the X for this team.
I see what you're saying on Juju being able to flourish. I think you made a great point. Excuse me. You made a great point that they targeted him last offseason, and they clearly have a role in mind for him. I think that Sky Moore's really, really good. So I think everything you said I can agree with until you said you're positive that Juju's the better value, because I think I'd be willing to tell you I'm willing to wait and see on that.
It's fine, and I don't blame you either because Sky Moore has league-winning potential, but I think Juju, if you are able to snag the Chiefs' X receiver and Patrick Mahomes does Patrick Mahomes things, you can get a crazy return on investment considering he's going in the 7th round.
I'm having such a blast, and I think it's pretty crazy. This is probably going to be our longest episode of the whole season, believe it or not. But there's just so much to talk about. We could literally sit down and spend at least 5 minutes on almost any player we're discussing today. So
100%.
That's super exciting. So, AJ, you want to take us home with our divisions to the Los Angeles Chargers?
Yeah, and I'll try and keep it quick. Justin Herbert threw for 5,000 yards, 40 touchdowns. Probably going to happen again. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both being drafted inside the top 15 as high-end wide receiver 2/low-end wide receiver 1s. That's exactly what they were last year, and I think that's exactly what they're going to be this year. I think the ADP of the LA Chargers is exactly what makes sense. You've got Eckler in the mid to later first round. You've got Keenan Allen and Mike Williams in the back end of the 2nd through the 3rd round. And I think all these guys are going to meet their ADPs quite accurately. I really think I'm just projecting this team to do exactly what they're projected to do, and that's throw the football a lot and score a lot of points. So Mike Williams, definitely more of a best ball type of player with his sporadic and sometimes inconsistent performances, but his ceiling is higher than Keenan Allen's, which makes him a little more enticing considering he's slightly cheaper as well. Keenan Allen, as you know, 6 straight years of 1,000 yards, 100+ targets. This guy is as consistent gets, but he is nearing that 30-year-old age mark, which is something of note to really take into consideration because he's not the 26-year-old Keenan Allen that we watched in 2018. This is a almost 31-year-old receiver, and that does need to be taken into note. So right now, I find myself taking a lot more of Mike Williams than Keenan Allen, but if Keenan Allen is sitting there at a really good value, even just a couple spots below ADP, I found it really hard to pass on him, but I'm definitely leaning Mike Williams. Austin Eckler, don't overthink it. It's Austin Eckler. I do like Isaiah Spiller, but that passing volume for Eckler is really the bread and butter of his fantasy production, and that's not going anywhere. I do have him a little bit below consensus. He's currently being drafted around 7th overall. I've got him a little closer to 9th, just because I've got Derrick Henry, Dalvin Cook, and potentially Joe Mixon right next to him, with some of those guys having better weekly rushing floors, which is really the big thing. And that is because I do think Isaiah Spiller has a serious chance to get involved on the goal line and in between the 20s. We are projecting the Chargers to be a really damn good football team. And if they're up 28-7 with 4 minutes left in the 3rd, Isaiah Spiller might be the guy on 3rd down and not 27-year-old Austin Eckler, who they want to save when they make that championship push that they really are capable of making. So that's pretty much my take on that for now, Ben.
Is Isaiah Spiller the Brevin Jordan of running backs? Just like straight out, like in the sense that like remember how Brevin Jordan was supposed to be like this close to Pat Fryermuth, like oh they're neck and neck, and then he went like 6 rounds later. And then remember how like Isaiah Spiller was like oh he's right after Breece Hall, and then like 6 rounds later he goes. So maybe I think Isaiah Spiller is like a sick upside play because it's an upside play on talent. The situation is there, and he's a guy that we thought was talented before. All we need to do is see him produce again, and it'll be very, very exciting.
Yeah, that's really all it is. He just needs to do it again, and I think he's very capable of it. Um, the thing is, he had a lot of inconsistencies, some poor performances, and some injury history as well. So there is risk baked into that to some degree. But I think that what we saw out of the Herbert Mike Williams connection, I trust Herbert to bring the best out of Mike Williams in his third year in the NFL. And the bet on Mike Williams has a lot more to do with Herbert, to be completely honest, than it does with Mike Williams. Real quick, I'll just touch on the last two pass catching options I want to discuss. Josh Palmer looks to be separating himself from Jalen Guyton as the wide receiver 3 throughout training camp. This is more of a dynasty player. This is more of a stash. I'm not in love with him in redraft. I do really think that he has a ton of potential dynasty value being tied to Justin Herbert for the next X amount of years. The Chargers don't seem in a terrible rush to bring in other young receivers at this point in time. They were really focused on shoring up that defense and offensive line, surrounding Justin Herbert with that, which is really important. And being the wide receiver for Justin Herbert does have its upside. So in best ball formats, I'll definitely have some shares of Josh Palmer. In season-long redraft, not so much. And then we've got Gerald Everett. Justin Herbert has gotten some really great seasons out of his tight ends, particularly his rookie year. He helped Hunter Henry have a career year before Henry left for New England. Gerald Everett is coming off of career highs in yards, targets, receptions, touchdowns, and fantasy points per touch. Jared Cook almost got 70 targets in this offense last year. Jared Cook is about 1/45th of the athlete that Gerald Everett currently is right now at this point in time. And they didn't bring in anybody else except for Gerald Everett to take any vacated targets that this offense might have. So I think Gerald Everett, currently being drafted as the tight end 17, is an absolute slam dunk value with a chance to return top 12 tight end upside, especially at cost. I'm definitely going to be owning tons of Gerald Everett this year.
So, two things I want to talk about. One is I also love Gerald Everett, and he's a huge reason why I'm not really drafting a lot of Albert O. Because every single time I'm on the board, I'm like, oh, I can take Albert O. But there's Gerald Everett. And so there's that. There's a little antidote there, and I think you would agree with having Everett over Albert O personally. Is that correct?
Yes, I currently have him over Albert O in my rankings.
But I have a quick question for you before we get into superlatives. Is there any chance, in your opinion, that Josh Palmer has standalone value this year?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll most likely come as a result of if the Chargers get in shootouts. But the thing is, I'm not projecting them to because I think this defense has actually made some significant strides with the acquisitions of Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson. But if they get into shootouts, I mean, Josh Palmer is able to slot in on the outside, and they move Keenan Allen inside, and it really opens up this offense. So I do think Josh Palmer does have some standalone value. I just personally, in season-long redraft, am not going to sit and wait on those 3 weeks to try and predict when he's going to do it. I'd rather just have him in best ball for when he does.
You remember in the NBA when the commission next to Chris Paul from the Lakers trade?
Mm-hmm.
First off, very prominent moment in my life. I remember exactly where I was. I was in line at Sarku, Japan, at my local mall food court, and I was like, "Holy crap!" I was with my brother. I feel like that, the NFL could have used the Chargers, being stepped in on when they got Khalil Mack. I feel like the Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James, J.C. Jackson, probably other guys I'm admittedly forgetting because all we talk about is offense, is so unfair. What do you even do?
Pray and
these
wish
poor
for the best.
tackles. It's going to be a long season for Garrett Bowles, let me tell you. So that's our 4 teams, and we hope you certainly got some takeaways and some provocative thoughts out of that because we certainly took our time. But now it's time to get into our superlatives. And AJ, before we get into the superlatives, even though I said we're hurrying, I have a question for you. Do you have a favorite one of these superlatives? Is there one of these that you're always really excited for?
I'm excited for my bold take. Definitely.
I love the bold take. Okay, and that was all. Must-have player in the division.
Do you? I'll gladly start talking about Javonte Williams.
Please do.
He's gonna win you your fantasy league. If you're drafting today, he's gonna do it. The Denver Broncos did not bring in a new QB and bring in a new coach to run the same offense that they did last year. Will they be more pass heavy? Absolutely. Did Javonte show he was a capable pass catcher? Absolutely. 43 receptions, 53 targets, 315 yards, and 3 touchdowns as a rookie with a pretty putrid offense in front of him. He ended the season absolutely sputtered to the finish line, but during weeks 8 to 12, he was actually phenomenal with multiple 20-point games, and he showed that without Melvin Gordon, he could handle it. He's got it. And to me, I know everybody cites this, but the broken tackle statistic is just, it's not about him breaking the tackles. It's that when he gets the ball, every run has the chance to become that much more efficient and that much more fantasy productive because of his elusiveness. And that elusiveness last year was basically second to none. He led the NFL in broken tackles with 31 and posted one of the highest broken tackle percentages in the league at 21.7%. So the talent is there. Nobody is disputing this. But the thing I want to talk about real quick, the way Nathaniel Hackett has generally worked his running back room. So if we go throughout his career, halfback carries per game as an offensive coordinator or head coach, it was 28 in 2013 when he was the OC of the Buffalo Bills. And in his entire time as an offensive coordinator or head coach, halfback carries per game have never been below 22.5. That's a lot of touches on the ground. And the big thing about that is these teams weren't necessarily the best running teams in the NFL. I mean, you had Buffalo. He was the OC for Buffalo in 2013. It was the OC for Jacksonville from 2016 to 2018, bringing out some of those Leonard Fournette RB1 seasons. And then it was the Green Bay Packers offensive coordination for 2019 through 2021. And with what we saw with that A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones tandem is he can scheme these running backs to both be fantasy relevant. We saw that with Dillon and Jones last year. And I think Javonte Williams is going to be Aaron Jones, but actually just be that much better and probably not as prolific in the passing game. But I really think Nathaniel Hackett knew what he was doing when he took this job because he said, okay, I just worked with 2 great running backs. Let me go to a team that's going to let me work with, oh, look, 2 great running backs. And one of them is going to be above the other. And I think it's pretty obvious that Javonte Williams is the guy to own here. So the combination of coaches scheming, efficient looks, elusiveness and efficiency from his run game last year in a bad offense and pass catching upside, plus this offense basically projecting to be top 10 by most metrics, means that Javonte Williams really does have a chance to be a top 3, top 4 running back that you can have outside of the top 15 picks right now, and he could totally win you your redraft league.
And that's AJ's must-have player, and he makes a lot of great points. The must-have player is not one we dispute way too hard because we love these guys. And now is my chance, and spoiler alert, this will not be my last instance of doing this offseason, but I got to get up on my soapbox and gas up my boy a little bit. Because in any league that matters, except for like one league that matters, because I traded him away, but it was a really good deal for me, so whatever. I have Jerry Jeudy literally almost everywhere. I'm in 10 dynasty leagues, and I have him in 5. I've done over 100 best ball drafts, and I have Jerry Jeudy in like 40% of them. I am putting all my chips in the middle of the table on this guy, and it's for a couple of reasons. First off, it's a bet on talent. Let's back up all the way to Alabama when people thought that Jerry Jeudy was one of the best receiver prospects ever coming out. Has that formulated in a Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, even a Jalen Waddle-esque way yet. No, it has not. Was he being discussed and treated similarly when he was coming out of school? Yes, he was. He was drafted over Justin Jefferson, and no one had a problem with it at the time. Mind you, everyone, it was consensus. Jerry Jeudy was a better prospect than Justin Jefferson. That's how people felt about it. Let's talk about Jerry Jeudy's NFL experience. And actually, AJ is about to smile because I'm going to bring up a very strong argument that is not usually what my argument sounds like when I'm like gassing up Jerry Jeudy. Usually when AJ and I are talking Jerry Jeudy, we've had one or two adult beverages. I'm like, Jerry Jeudy, man, let's see here. Here's some real analysis. Jerry Jeudy commanded 113 targets as a rookie. As a rookie, he came in and commanded 113 targets. If you believe targets are earned, that is fantastic. Coming in and immediately demanding triple-digit targets. He only caught 52 of them. He struggled with drops a little bit, but also quarterback play. He had Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater throwing the ball those past 2 years, but 850 yards and on 52 receptions is unbelievable efficiency. He averaged 16 yards per catch as a rookie. He's only scored 3 touchdowns in his NFL career. And now now that we've talked about how he came into the league and immediately demanded respect and volume, remember those routes he was running against Carolina, just torching corners? Disgusting. Let's take it to last year. Because last year, this was like the best 20 minutes of my entire life. Not actually, but in my football life. Was that week 1 Denver versus New York Giants first half. When Jerry Jeudy gave you 6 receptions on 7 targets for 72 yards. I feel like Scott Hansen must have said Jerry Jeudy's name 20 times in the first 20 minutes of NFL Red Zone last year. The breakout was coming. It was we were on the precipice of it. I was watching with my own eyes. No one could guard this man. And it didn't matter who the quarterback was. No one can guard him. And that Giants defense had James Bradbury. This Giants defense came into last year starting off well. This is week 1 where people are betting on talent. And Jerry Jeudy comes in and he's torching the secondary with Bradbury, with Jabril Peppers. And it's looking all sunshine and rainbows until he gets hurt. And then he gets hurt. And that sucks. It sucks to watch a player get hurt, especially a guy who's so young and looks like he's about to snap and go ballistic. And then he misses the next 6 games. He comes back a little slow, still commands a couple targets, still has games with 8 targets, 9 targets, a couple with 6. Doesn't get in the end zone. He had 2 games with 6 receptions and over 48 yards. That's like 11 and 12-point games. But if you score a touchdown on that, then you're a top 12 play on the week at 20 fantasy points. 1 touchdown. And this season looks different. Now, he's back. He's healthy. He had the full offseason because when guys get hurt mid-season and come back, they generally just don't go on tears. They're kind of like, it's a lot less about fantasy. They're just trying to help their team. Okay, how can I play my role? He has the offseason. He's been working with Russell Wilson. Yes, there's talk that Russ prefers the stereotypical big-bodied receiver in Sutton, but everyone is saying that Jerry Jeudy and Russell Wilson have this great rapport. Nathaniel Hackett is in camp talking about how Jerry Jeudy's a student of the game and challenges him on things, and he loves Jerry. I want in on the guy who was drafted before Justin Jefferson and no one had a problem with it, and I certainly want in on him when he has one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL throwing him the football. I think Jerry Jeudy is going to win me tons of leagues this year, and I think he can for you too.
I've been taking more Jerry Jeudy for sure.
Yes, you have, and it has warmed my heart. Every time you send me the screenshot, I smile.
I prefer him over Courtland Sutton, and I'm going to actually take it directly to my next superlative. Can't have player in this division. It's a tie. Both of these guys are super talented. Both of these guys are being drafted in the top 48, and I think it's a little bit rich for my taste. Courtland Sutton and honorable mention, I won't get too into it because we discussed it with the Raiders for quite some time, but Darren Waller is an honorable mention for this spot as well. But for Courtland Sutton, the big thing is people point to DK Metcalf and DK Metcalf's production. Courtland Sutton is not DK Metcalf. Please, please, please remember that this guy averaged less than 20 receiving yards a game for the last 9 weeks of last season. I understand he was returning from an injury, but he had a 24-point game against the Steelers earlier that year with the same quarterback under center. When him and Jeudy were on the field together, Courtland Sutton was Judy's understudy. He was Judy's second fiddle. He was not the guy that needed 8-9 targets because of his separation. Cortland Sutton was the guy that got 4 or 5 targets because he was the bigger body and he was deeper downfield and it was third and long. Is that going to lead to fantasy success with Russell Wilson? Probably. Am I going to be the one that depends on him trying to fill DK Metcalf's role? Absolutely not. It's not worth the energy when you have to draft him at 37th overall on Underdog when I could wait 4 rounds and go get Rashad Bateman, Devonta Smith, Elijah Moore, and guys with his weekly upside and possibly a lower floor, but similar upside for basically less than half the cost. So I'm totally not drafting much Cortland Sutton this year, especially you're going to have to take him pretty much near his ceiling around wide receiver 15.
You just made me so happy. That was you said the Jerry Jeudy Cortland Sutton stat. You said he was wide receiver 157 when Jerry Jeudy was on the field. You get it. You get it. Jerry Judy's the league winner and Cortland Sutton's not. What's up? Okay. I unfortunately my can't have player is controversial. I will admit that I certainly would rather have this can't have player than other can't have players from other divisions for what it's worth. Like, I certainly like this player more than Treylon Burks. I like him more than J.K. Dobbins. I like him more than, I'm just swiping through, more than Kenneth Walker. So a lot of these guys that I've been saying I can't have been like guys I'm really like, no, I can't have. But like this division, like this division is beautiful. Like all these guys are guys we want. So like I could sit here and tell you that I can't have Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but that doesn't actually do you anything as the listener. Like you can figure out to take Ramondre Stevenson or over Clyde Edwards-Helaire on your own. That's like keep up, figure it out. I'm going to talk about a player who, because his ADP is so high, and because there's so much surrounding talent, and because they're getting up there in age, I find myself not drafting a lot of Keenan Allen. I understand that the man saw 157 targets last year and was a wide receiver 10. I understand that Justin Herbert had a 5,000-yard passing season and is only going to be better this year, supposedly. The tough thing for me with Keenan Allen is a couple things. First off, the age. Guys drop off out of the blue, like out of nowhere. Like you can be elite one year and the next year you're dust. I'm not saying that will happen, and I'm really hoping it doesn't because Keenan Allen's amazing. What it's really about is that as Keenan Allen gets older, but Mike Williams continues to improve, I think I would rather have Mike Williams. I think Mike Williams is the big play guy. I think Mike Williams is the touchdown guy. And I feel that for Keenan Allen, like a lot of his work could just be, I don't want to say phased out, but I'm worried about like Austin Eckler taking receptions away from Keenan Allen. I'm worried about Gerald Everett's emergence a little bit, even if it's just 10 targets there. Every single point matters. But my real point is that I think that Mike Williams could be giving us another elite season, a best season to date. And because Keenan Allen goes above him, and I'd rather have Mike Williams, I'm not taking Keenan Allen. I understand that take sounds a little weak. Well, the reason is that it is. This division is awesome. So, like, I wouldn't sit here and tell you to never take Keenan Allen. I'm just not taking a lot of Keenan Allen because I'm taking Mike Williams or Kyle Pitts or Michael Pittman or T. Higgins. So that's what that comes into.
I can't really dispute anything you said. We have passed the hour mark. We are going to try and wrap this up as quickly as possible. We talked about both these guys, but real quick, we'll just highlight favorite sleeper. Mine is Isaiah Spiller because of what I said prior. If the Chargers are beating down on bad teams, they're not going to throw Austin Eckler out there to the Wolves to potentially get hurt. I do think Spiller has some standalone value because of that. Some receiving chops, which does help if he does need to fill for Austin Eckler, which if he is able to get that receiving role with Austin Eckler potentially being sidelined at any point this year, that upside can really get realized into a top 12, top 18 weekly guy. So I like Isaiah Spiller as a guy you can have in basically the 13th round as one of the more reliable and exciting handcuff options.
Totally agree. My favorite sleeper is Sky Moore because think about everything we said earlier about Juju as well. There's one thing with Juju that we didn't talk about, and like it's maybe not fair. So like if you don't want to take this to the bank, take it with a grain of salt. Judy sometimes struggles to stay on the field a little bit, or sometimes he plays games hurt. If those guys are like neck and neck, like Sky Moore could find himself in league winner territory with a Juju twisted ankle, and then he just keeps doing what he's doing. And the rest can just be history.
Yeah. Favorite dynasty stash for me is going to be Josh Palmer. Being tied to Justin Herbert is pretty much all he needs to remain worth stashing in dynasty. I don't think he's insanely talented, but there's few receivers in a better situation. He's playing behind two guys with injury history as well. There's a very clear path to volume. So definitely Josh Palmer for me. I've traded him in dynasty leagues and I've regretted it because I really thought I should have held on. But if you have Josh Palmer, I definitely suggest you hold the line because there is a realistic world where in the next 18 months we see Josh Palmer as the wide receiver 2 on this depth chart.
Chargers win the Super Bowl. Keenan Allen retires. Josh Palmer's a top 24 play next year. Wait it out. Don't trade him. My favorite stash, it's admittedly a little tough because a lot of these guys are like really good and are developed. So I felt like I only had 3 options to choose from, which was Greg Dulcich, Zamir White, and the guy I actually picked, which is Isaiah Pacheco, who I also just traded away. And when I saw that he was getting a couple reps with the ones, I was really upset. I was really, really upset. But look, he had the fastest 40 time in the draft, and he's 215 pounds. Played at Rutgers, Big Ten school. If that's not worth holding on to at the end of your bench, I don't know what is.
Fair enough. All right, bold taking each division. I've got 6 top 24 receivers coming from this division, with 2 of them coming from the Chargers, at least 1 coming from Kansas City. One of them, yes, only one of them, coming from Denver, and 2 coming from the LA Raiders in Devontae Adams and Hunter Renfrow.
I love it. Jerry Giudi, top 12. Book it.
That's going to do it for the AFC South episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. We will be concluding the divisional preview series with our favorite division as Jets and Patriots fan, respectively, the AFC East. So stay tuned for that. Ben, any last words before people head out?
I can't wait for football. Have a great day, everybody.
What he said. Have a good one, guys.